Choosing raw food can be very complicated, but in this video I am going to break it all down for you and I'm going to enumerate a lot of the options you have. Before we start, my name is Sam. I'm a dog and cat nutritionist and proud owner of a chain of independent pet shops where we exclusively focus on nutrition. And today I am going to break down the different kinds of raw foods you can get on the market, and just to answer quite a few questions that we normally get, and this is just to help you. Now, there are two main camps when it comes to raw food. You have the straight 80-10-10s, and then you have the meat and the vegetables. And the main difference is that the straight 80-10-10s contain meat, offal and bone, and this comprises of 80% muscle meat, 10% offal, of which 5% is liver, and then 10% of the overall recipe is bone. And that is it. This type of raw dog food does not contain anything else apart from meat, and meat. So it's 80% meat, 10% offal, of which 5% is liver, and 10% is bone. The other camp tends to be the 85-15s or the 80-20s, or in other cases, the 50-50s. And this is 85 or 80% meat, offal, and bone, and then the remaining of the recipe tends to be fruit and veg. Now, it is my belief that if you opt for something with veg, that you believe in veg and you want to feed your dog fruit and vegetables, those fruit and veg do not comprise more than maybe 10-15% of your dog's overall diet. Why? Well, you want to be paying for meat at the end of the day, and a lot of these manufacturers will give you as much veg and fruit as you will take, and if you are going to raw feed, that's because you sort of want your dog to eat more meat, more fresh meat than anything else. So I don't think you should give your dog more than maybe 5, 10, 15% fruits and veg, but that is probably your prerogative. Now, when it comes to making choices and when it comes to different camps, one, in my opinion, is not better than the other. We have seen people, and we see people literally every single day getting that for years and years on end, or that for years and years on end, and both dogs seem to be happy, seem to be healthy, and seem to be doing okay. Why? Because dogs at the end of the day are going to get all the tidbits, and they will get all the bits and bobs from treats, from other supplements, from other probiotics, from other prebiotics, etc., etc. So in my opinion, one is not better than the other, as long as the raw food you consume is approved and it's good quality, and you check with the manufacturer that they use very lean cuts of meat and high quality portions and high quality cuts of meat. In my opinion, one is not better than the other. Now, when it comes to formats, there are quite a few different formats. We have straight minces like that one or like that one, and they come in blocks, and the problem with those sometimes is that you have to defrost them, and if you get like 1 kilo or stuff like this, which is quite hefty, it might take you a while to defrost in your freezer. Same with that when you leave it out on the top. So sometimes can be a bit difficult if you have a very big dog, or if you have a very small dog and you get something quite big. That's why different formats come into play. Now, the one I really like is some of these nuggets, and these nuggets are just literally nuggets, and you can pour them out, defrost a few at a time, and they are very, very convenient. Quite a few manufacturers do it, but the point of the video is not to go into different manufacturers, it's for you to learn about the different formats, because depending on where you are in the world, some of these formats might be available, some of these formats might not be available. We also have things like minces, and again, these are quite fine minces, and these will be just another format. Now, the thing with raw food that I want you to get across is that it makes absolutely no sense for you to buy the same recipe every single time. The main thing with raw food is that if you are subscribed to raw feeding, you rotate the different meats, and when you rotate the different meats, then your dog is going to get different vitamins and minerals. If you come from the world of kibble, it makes absolutely no sense for you to only buy the chicken, or for you to buy always the lamb, tripe and turkey, or whatever the case might be. You get a turkey, you get a chicken, you get a lamb, you get some fish, you get different meats, and they all go into rotation. My dog, for example, gets 13 meats on rotation. You don't have to be as extreme, but you get the point. Try to get 5 to 10 different minces, 5 to 10 different flavors, 5 to 10 different meats, and your dog will be a lot better off. Variety here is the spice of life. If you have a fussy dog, that's a separate thing. If you have a dog and you raw feed them, you should probably do different meats. Now, a lot of these things are complete and natural, and they contain everything your dog is meant to have. What does that mean? That means that you do not have to add anything to the recipe. And this is something we see a lot in terms of people wanting to make their own dog food, which is or can be quite risky because people do not know what the heck they are doing sometimes. So if you are going to DIY your own dog food, I highly encourage you against it. I don't want you to do it because unless you have a lot of time, unless you know what you're doing, unless you have a recipe book, for example, it is quite hard to get all the measurements right and for your dog to get a lot of inconsistencies in their diet. And just to give you a bit of a flavor, this is, for example, just spleen. So this is just lamb spleen. So you would get something like this, a little bit of bone, maybe a little bit of muscle meat, maybe a little bit of fish in that form or in this form, and that is just fish. And you would get this, and this, and you would try to create a recipe that for that day or for that week would give your dog everything they would need. Now, in my opinion, for you to get all the varieties and all the different measurements correctly, you have to have a lot of time and you need to know what you're doing. This is why I'm a huge advocate for even people who have been raw feeding for years and years and years to literally just buy this with vegetables, without vegetables, you thaw it, you defrost it, you give it to the dog, and the dog is happy. And that is everything your dog is going to need, and that's the extent to raw feeding that you are going to go into. I don't really want you to defrost 2 or 3 here, 2 or 3 here, give your dog this, that, the other, and then you start creating maybe imbalances and you don't really know what you're doing. In terms of formats, one, again, is not better than the other. You can get nuggets, you can get fine minces, you can get blocks, you can get veg, no veg. One is not better than the other. When it comes to treats, I always like things like that, which are single protein. These are pig snouts, those are salmon rolls, for example, and these are small venison legs. Now, when it comes to adding on different treats, what we see a lot of the time is that some dogs will get constipated or some dogs will get a lot of imbalances because people will give their dogs things that aren't appropriate or things that your dog doesn't really need any more of. So if you are giving your dog a raw food and that contains 10% bone and your dog is happy with the bone, you do not need to add any more bone to your dog's diet because your dog might get constipated and you might create a problem. So if you are going to give your dog any treats whatsoever, make sure they are organ meat, so make sure they are single protein and that they aren't too weird. What we see a lot of the time is that people will give their dogs liver, for example, and they will give their dog a lot of liver when the dog is already getting liver through the raw food. So it doesn't really make sense for you to add on more liver, more heart, more bone, etc, etc. In terms of different supplements and different treats you can give your dog if you raw feed, anything with fur I absolutely love. Bunny ears, they are one of my favorite. They are one of my dog's favorite and they are incredible. Another thing I get a lot is broths, natural broths, and you can add them to your dog's diet for added moisture. But bear in mind that your dog is going to get a lot of water and a lot of moisture from the diet, primarily because they are being raw fed. Raw food is absolutely incredible, it's wonderful, and it's probably the species appropriate diet for your dog. But you have to pay attention on how to handle it, how you defrost it, and how you handle it, and how you go on about doing it. The one point I would like to make is that raw feeding done responsibly is extremely good, but we see a lot of people who don't really know what they are doing, and because they don't know what they are doing, they give everyone else a bad rap, especially when it comes to forums, especially when it comes to people having different opinions on raw food. So if you are going to go through this sort of route, what I want you to do is pay attention to what you're doing. Learn about the different meats, learn about the different rotations, learn about the different muscle meats, learn about liver, learn about bone, and learn about all these things. A lot of people, for example, will give the dog a huge bone as their first or second bone. The dog might choke on it, and then they will blame the raw food or the raw feeder for it. Yes, because the bone was very big for your dog to start with. Now, if you want to know about what the best dog food is, I would highly encourage you to download a free guide, How to Feed Your Dog Better. There's the 10 Commandments of Dog Health. The list is free. Some key takeaways: whether you choose a brand of dog food with veg or without veg, one is not better than the other. It's very, very important you rotate the meats, and it's very, very important that you don't always go for the same one, and you don't get annoyed at the shop that they don't have the one variety that your dog really, really likes. That defeats the purpose of raw feeding. And then find a format you are comfortable with. You have to obviously bear in mind freezer space, and you have to bear in mind a few things, whether you have kids, whether you have other pets, etc., etc. But raw food done properly can have incredible benefits to your dog when it comes to diabetes, pancreatitis, when it comes to obesity, when it comes to allergies. These things can have an absolute wonderful impact on your dog's overall health. So it's something to absolutely try if you can. Especially, I want to touch on allergies or gastrointestinal upset. The one thing about raw food that you can absolutely do is choose meat that is quite rare for your dog. So instead of going for chicken or beef or some of the most common ones, you can choose lamb, you can choose goat, you can choose mackerel, you can choose venison, you can choose one of these rare meats, rabbit for example, and those meats are going to be a lot less likely for your dog to be allergic to them. Whereas if you always choose chicken or you always choose beef, that might be a little bit of a problem, because more dogs are going to be allergic to beef or chicken than to venison or rabbit. So that's something really, really interesting that you can do. You can choose a single protein food, say an 80-10-10 with just rabbit, and see how your dog does. And then once you know that the dog is okay on rabbit, then you can move on to other meats, and then you can rotate among 4 or 5 different meats, which is what we want. We want to give our dog as many meats as possible so they can be exposed to as many nutrients as possible.